We are now 5 weeks through the season, and some of the game's biggest names haven't lived up to the expectations that they place on themselves every year. Julio Jones in the past 2 weeks has 7 catches for 94 yards in combined games, and DeAndre Hopkins has just 1 game above 90 receiving yards in 2019. Aaron Rodgers, who is often regarded as one of the league's premier and best quarterbacks, has just 1 game above 240 yards passing through the first 5, while Josh Allen from the Buffalo Bills has 3 games above 240 yards passing through 5 games. It's been a crazy 5-week stretch, and there will be players that have big games in Week 6, and that's what I'll discuss in today's video, is 5 players that I think will have big Week 6 fantasy performances. Before I get started though, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel, as all support is very much appreciated. Now with that being said, let's begin. The first player that I think has a big Week 6 performance is Texans wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins. As mentioned earlier, he has only one 90-plus yard game through the first 5 weeks, but he does play a Chiefs defense this week that doesn't have the best of corners to match up against him. Deshaun Watson threw for over 425 yards and 5 touchdowns in Week 5 against Atlanta, and should definitely continue a high level of play against the Chiefs. Expecting Watson to throw for these kind of numbers every week is asinine, but a 350-yard, 3-touchdown performance wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. Rather than Will Fuller being the primary beneficiary of that type of performance, I think is where DeAndre comes in this week. I think he has his second 100-yard game of the year and has a touchdown as well. Hopkins has 4 career games against the Chiefs, and in those games he has a touchdown in every one and has went for over 100 yards against them before. I'm expecting a big week from Hopkins. Moving on to the next player that I think has a big Week 6 is Falcons wide receiver Julio Jones. Julio Jones has 7 catches for 94 yards in the past 2 weeks, but in the previous 2 weeks before that, he had 13 catches for 234 yards and 3 touchdowns. Julio had a 2-game stretch in 2018 in which he had 10 catches for 150 yards, and in both of those games he had under 100 yards and followed up with a 9-catch 173-yard performance. Later in the year, he had another 2-game stretch where he had back-to-back games under 100 yards and then followed that up with a 9-catch 138-yard and a touchdown game. The trend here is that Julio follows 2 less than stellar games of his own standards with a great one, and there is no indication as to why he can't do that against the Cardinals in Week 6. The Cardinals are without Patrick Peterson, and the Falcons should be able to take advantage of that and feed Julio early and often. I think Matt Ryan has a big week statistically against a weak Arizona secondary, and Julio will play a big part in this. I'm expecting over 100 yards and a touchdown from him. The next player that I think has a big Week 6 is Lions wide receiver Kenny Golladay. Before the Week 5 bye, Kenny Golladay had touchdowns in 3 of the Lions' first 4 games and was impacting the game in a big way. He had 2 touchdowns against the Chiefs, where the Lions almost took them down but lost on a late Patrick Mahomes drive. Golladay in 2 career games against the Packers has a game with 80 yards and a game with 98 yards and a touchdown in each game. I think he makes the next step against Green Bay and has his first 100-yard game against them on Monday night. The Packers will probably look to have Jair Alexander on him for most of the night, which might not work out so well as Jair was targeted 11 times against Amari Cooper on Sunday and gave up 8 receptions for 201 yards and a touchdown. I look for the Lions to get Golladay involved a lot and try and get him going, as in games where he has 100 yards and a touchdown, the Lions are 2-0. They should try and continue this trend and steal a win in Lambeau. The next player that I think has a big Week 6 is Jets running back Le'Veon Bell. Le'Veon Bell, to some people, hasn't been the best so far as a New York Jet, and I can understand why they think that. He has 0 games above 70 rushing yards, but to be fair to Le'Veon, he has 3 games at or above 6 receptions and another game with 4 receptions. To say Le'Veon has been a bust so far as a Jet is unfair to him, as the offense has had to go completely through him due to Sam Darnold having mono for most of the season. Le'Veon should have at worst 100 total yards this week, as we saw Packers running back Aaron Jones last week have 107 rushing yards and 4 touchdowns against this same Dallas defense. Bell has had to work with Luke Falk as his quarterback, and to say that's a disadvantage from him to get good numbers for fantasy owners is an understatement, as opposing defenses can crowd the box and force Falk to beat them through the air, which has worked so far as the Jets are winless on the season. Le'Veon is too talented of a player to be constantly held under 100 yards or 125 total yards, and I think he has a solid game this week against the Cowboys. Whether or not his numbers come in garbage time is to be determined, but a realistic stat line for Le'Veon this week is 80 rushing yards and another 60 to 70 receiving yards along with a touchdown. The final player that I think has a big week 6 is Chargers wide receiver Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen against the Steelers in 2018 had 14 catches for 148 yards and a touchdown. He also, in his last 2 games, has a total of 9 catches for 66 yards and 0 touchdowns, so to say he's due for a big performance would be an understatement. Keenan was in my big performers for week 3 against the Texans, and he didn't let me down as he went for 13 catches for 183 yards and 2 touchdowns. To me, there is no reason as to why he would let me down here, as he is due for a big performance and has had recent success against the Steelers secondary. While the Steelers have added Minkah Fitzpatrick since the last time these teams played, the Chargers should still look to feed Keenan the ball, as the Chargers are 14-9 when he goes for over 100 yards during his career, and are 28-24 when he has less than 100 yards. The Chargers' winning probability goes from 54% to over 61% when Keenan has 100 yards, and he has a good shot of getting that this week. I don't think he'll receive the 19 targets he had against them last year, but to say he could get 10 to 13 targets is definitely realistic for him this Sunday night. That's all I have for today's video. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Again, thank you for watching, and have a great day. Skol Vikes.